So what's going on with Doflamingo? Mingo's probably the most iconic villain in One Piece, and he's just a joy to experience every time he's on panel, but recently that's not too often. The last time we saw him was near the start of Wano, just having a great time with the newspaper as per usual, but not much else. So where's he gonna go from here? Well, to answer that, we gotta go all the way back and look at all of the events that led up to this. Donquixote Doflamingo was born in Marijua as a celestial dragon. From his backstory, we know he lived pretty much the standard life of a celestial, having slaves, being ultra privileged, all that, but that would all come crashing down for him when his father Homing had the realization, unlike everyone else in Marijua, that he was a human and as such wanted to live down below Marijua. Now Homing's an interesting case. He's not like Mihawk, the celestial dragon that changed because of the influence of average people and genuinely tried to fight for their rights. Homing came from privilege and had his opinions changed while still in privilege. He pretty much had the mindset that, oh, I'm a human, I'll go live among the humans where I belong. Sure, he's on the right track, but he's incredibly naive, and I don't think he truly understood the scope of the system he was born into. He thought slavery was bad because we're all humans and therefore we're the same, but he never tried to change it. He never bought slaves then released them or at least give them a better life. He just thought, oh, this system is wrong, so I'll remove myself from it, and that's the end, without seemingly any care for the horrible crimes still going on. So he's not a bad person, but much more neutral than good. So he and his family leave Marijua. The Celestials give him a huge mansion and enough money to where he never has to work again, but as I said, Dofi was used to his life on Marijua, going around demanding people to bow to him and things like that, and maybe because of this, but very likely because those at Marijua arranged for it, everyone found out that they were former Celestials. And as you can expect, after terrorizing the world and treating people as their playthings for centuries, these people took out the full brunt of their anger on Dofi's family. Homing desperately begs the Celestials to take his family back even if they don't take him, but they just tell him that he can't regain what he's cast aside and calls him a filthy human. Very convenient, by the way, their definition of human. One trip down to a mega mansion in the North Blue and suddenly you go from god to filthy peasant in about a week. Funny how that works. But anyway, the locals capture the family, string them up and torture them with no mercy for the children Doflamingo and Rocinante. Soon after, Dofi's mother falls sick and dies, and this is the breaking point for him. He runs away from his father and meets Treble and some others. He unlocks Conqueror's Haki and they tell him he has the qualities of a king. They play into his god complex, something he hasn't felt since leaving Marijua. They groom and manipulate him, nurturing his worst qualities to create a cold-blooded killer that they could have as a leader when he grew up. Treble puts a nail in the coffin by asking if he wants to kill anyone and presenting him with a gun and a devil fruit. He returns to his father and brother with his new crew and puts a gun to Homing's head. Homing says he's sorry they had him as a father, and despite Rocinante's pleas for him to stop, he pulls the trigger. He then takes Homing's head to Marijua to try and gain his place back, but they refused him. While there, he learned the secret of the Celestial Dragons before escaping that he could later use to blackmail them. At that moment, he swore that since they wouldn't give him back his place, he would take the world that they controlled and destroy it. This was the first sprouting of Doflamingo's destructive ideology, the ideology of chaos that he shows from this point on. He's only interested in three things: enjoying himself, causing chaos and destruction anywhere he can, and protecting his new family. The last one is really interesting, and I want to touch on that. From the outset, it seems like Doflamingo is an outright psychopath, only caring about himself and causing destruction to others, but no, he shows emotion quite a lot. He's not purely ruthless and logical, even trying to trust Rocinante despite all the signs of him being a traitor later on. And he truly cares for his new family. He doesn't just put on a front to gain their loyalty. He genuinely, in his own way, loves them, and ironically, a lot of that comes from their manipulation of him, rather than the other way around. Treble in particular festered the worst parts of him. No, he didn't plant the seed of Dofi's evil, that was there since he was a celestial dragon, but he grew the seed, and this attached Doflamingo to him and the rest of them. They were telling him everything he wanted to hear, so they bonded over that. They were completely devoted to him, killing anyone who crossed him, even burning down an entire town because Dofi tripped on a road there. And this bond has lasted up until now. He wants to share the throne that he believes is rightfully his with his family, almost as a slight to the celestial dragons. If he's really able to become king, as Treble puts it, it'll prove the opposite of what the Celestials believe, that bloodlines are everything. But no, Dofi has his own found family. From his point of view, all of his real family have betrayed him, but he can rely on this new one. And he was right, their loyalty never wavered, I guess because they felt they made the right bet. Dofi rose through the underworld to become incredibly rich and powerful, so they never felt the need to betray him. But speaking of betrayal, eventually, as part of a plan to gain himself immortality, Dofi went after the Opiopi fruit. But his brother Rocinante, now calling himself Corazon, along with being an undercover marine, fed the fruit to Law to cure his illness. Korra again pleads with his brother, just like when he was going to kill their father, but this time to let Law be free, not caring that the gun was being pointed at him. But Dofi didn't care. From his point of view, Corazon betrayed him, something that his father had done by taking them from Marijua, and something that his new family would never do, so he felt no guilt in pulling the trigger. After this, Doflamingo continued building his underground empire and simultaneously built his legitimate empire by blackmailing the government with the secrets he knew to get a place on the 7 warlords. And with this newfound position, he set his sights on taking over Dressrosa, the country his family, the Donquixotes, ruled 800 years ago, before leaving for Mihawk. He believed this was his rightful place, his birthright. If he couldn't be a celestial dragon, he'd take the place set out for him by his family 800 years ago instead. So he orchestrated just about the most diabolical plan in the entire story, to turn half the country into toys with one of his crewmates' devil fruits, which, quick recap, makes it so the person turned into a toy is forgotten by everyone, even their loved ones, and they're forced to do whatever the devil fruit user orders them to do. On top of this, the way Dofi took control was to use his fruit to puppet the king and make it look like he was killing his own people, and not even make it look like, actually making him kill his own people with his own sword without being able to stop it. Along with that, just causing chaos all over the country so that eventually when he swooped in to save everyone, no one would have a problem with him taking over. So yeah, straight up nightmarish activity. He used all of this new power to form an alliance with the Emperor Kaido and the undisputed second best scientist in the world, Caesar, which he definitely isn't insecure about. But anyway, the partnership entailed Caesar making artificial devil fruits called smiles. Why are they called smiles? Basically, if you eat it, there's a small chance you get a devil fruit power, but most likely you'll get a side effect which makes it so instead of every other emotion, the only emotion you can display is happiness and laughter. So your family dies, you start laughing. And of course, Dofi being Dofi, decided to name it Smile because he's just like that. The purpose of this alliance was 1, money, but more importantly, Kaido planned to use these fruits to make a huge army of devil fruit users, the biggest the world had ever seen, to wage a war on the world government, and pretty much everyone else who stood against him. Pretty much a picture-perfect example of what Dofi wants: complete chaos and war to really stick it to the celestial dragons, get him to panic a bit, and Dofi would be right there to laugh at it all. But of course, you can't stay on top forever. All it takes is one idiot to screw up all your plans, and this idiot was Dofi's kryptonite. He destroyed the factory where the smiles were made, kidnapped the scientists, went to Dressrosa, destroyed another factory, beat up Dofi's whole crew, beat up Dofi himself, sent him to prison, then for good measure, just so Dofi wouldn't even have the satisfaction of watching Kaido's war from the newspapers, beat up Kaido too, and all this within the span of like a month. You'd think Dofi would be depressed after all this, but nah, he's actually having a jolly good time right now reading the paper, because even though there isn't a war, the world's still crazier than it's been in decades. The Celestials are in a panic and essentially cornered by the revolutionaries, while at the same time having their power and dominance undermined by pirates like Luffy, and quite a large part of this is due to Dofi's actions or influence in one way or another, so you could tell he's really happy about that. So Dofi thinks the assassin is coming to kill him in prison right now, so the secrets of Mihawk never come out, and he's a pretty sharp guy, so I assume he's right. So where do things go from here? Well, firstly, we gotta figure out how Dofi's gonna survive the assassin, presumably a CP0 agent, and then get out of prison. Well, I see it going one of two ways. You know that Tai Lung scene from Kung Fu Panda? Random, I know, but I think Dofi could get out this way. The assassin coming to kill him is ultimately what allows him to escape. He's really smart, so I think he could find a way to beat the assassin and get out of his handcuffs and slip out of Impel Down either undetected or bust his way out. Probably the former, since I don't think Dofi, especially a weakened Dofi who's been in sea prison cuffs for almost a month, is gonna be able to beat Magellan, let alone all of the others. But if he has no choice but to fight, this is where my second and more likely theory comes in. Recently, Edward Weevil got captured, and we can assume he's in Impel Down. His mother basically ordered Marco to go save him, and Marco, being such a great guy, is probably gonna do it. So I assume he gets the old gang back together, Diamond Jozu, maybe Vista, some others too, and break in to save Weevil. Now where Dofi comes in is he either is already out of his cell and uses this as a chance to escape, or he's still locked up and it becomes a crocodile situation. Bro starts doing his villain laugh and says he can help Marco and the others escape if they get him out of his cell. I think with all of them working together, it would be a pretty surefire breakout, but the complications come in with Dofi's family. I think one of his goals would be to get his family out of there. As we've seen, he undoubtedly cares for them, so that could add a pretty substantial challenge to the breakout, having to go to all different floors looking for them and such. Or maybe prisons changed Dofi. I doubt it, but we can't ignore the possibility that he's now fully locked into his goal to cause chaos and leaves his family behind. But I honestly think this is very unlikely and he's gonna get out with his family. So let's say he does escape. Where's he gonna go from there? Well, for me, there's three options. The first is the least likely, and that's just pretty much picking up where he left off. Having all of his family there with him, he starts up a new crew and goes back to being Joker. But I don't think that's likely at all. One, that would be very boring for the story unless Oda executes it very well. I mean, what's the point of having Dofi break out if it's just the same thing again? So there doesn't seem to be much of a point doing this. Dofi lost everything. He got thrown in prison and was about to be assassinated, so it's clear what he was doing wasn't working, so it's time for change. Which leads me to my next option, the revolutionaries. Now hear me out, okay? Yeah, it would seem that Dragon wouldn't touch this man with a 10-foot pole, but as far as evil people go, he's quite unique. With his secrets about Mihawk that the Celestials are very desperate to keep under wraps, to his burning desire to take down the world government, it could be a mutual alliance, Dragon, to me at least, seems like the type to be willing to partner with bad people if it can advance his goals and improve the world in the long run. The main concern for him would be betrayal, but honestly, the way I see it playing out, he won't be close enough to betray them. Dragon's gonna be cautious, meet Doflamingo in neutral territory, and I don't see him being a member. It'll be more of a loose alliance at best, and probably will only involve Dofi trading the secrets he knows for something he wants. What would that be? I don't really know. Maybe just the fact that the secrets would be used to harm the Celestials would be enough, and he'd give it as a gift. But I think if he can get something out of it, he will. He's a businessman after all. So ultimately, whether or not he loosely works with the revolutionaries, there's only one place he can really end up. Yeah, you were expecting this? The Cross Guild. This has been built up for so long, ever since Marineford with Dofi asking Crocodile to team up. It just always made sense. I would for sure see them two teaming up before Crocodile and Mihawk, but here we are. And yeah, everything just fits together nicely. So what role would Dofi have in the Cross Guild? Well, as it stands, the Cross Guild is in a very strange place. The almighty Buggy has just decreed that they're going after the One Piece, and it seems like the crew's now gonna drag Mihawk and Crocodile along for that. So if Dofi joins, I really think the best role for him would be to stay behind and handle the bounty side of things. You know how the people turning in bounties would like come to Buggy, like that old man for example? That would now be Dofi. He'd manipulate all the bounty hunters, change around the bounties, maybe even make the bounty hunters fight each other, you know, all his shenanigans. It would be fun, and overall, being a pretty genius businessman, I can see him vastly improving the bounty system and adding more incentives, all with the goal of course, undermining and disrupting the Navy. Reprising his role as Joker, he'd use his underground influence to convince all kinds of people to go after the bounties. He'd make it so every Navy captain and above would be hunted 10 times worse than now, all while improving the Cross Guild's profits, I'm sure. This would be the perfect role for him, right in the center of it all, controlling the very fear of the entire Navy. Let's face it, Dofi isn't that strong when you get up to Emperor crew level. I don't see him getting this massive prison buff and being able to compete with Emperors. I see him taking up a role like this, where he can influence the entire world relatively safely and behind the scenes, being a puppet master as he always has been, but on the largest scale. I literally can't think of a more perfect role for him, and this would leave the Cross Guild in great hands while the others are out chasing the One Piece. So how do I see Dofi's story end? Eventually this Cross Guild system has to end, whether it's before the final war or after, and I think Dofi would voluntarily end it before the war, or at least just leave it behind. As I said, he loves being in the center of it all, seeing history being made in front of his eyes, so he's definitely pulling up to the final war, at least to watch. And while watching it all go down, I think he has to have a final fight. And who better but Law? This would seal everything and really wrap up both their character arcs. For Law himself to finally defeat Dofi, to overcome all the abuse and trauma he's caused him would be incredible, and I can see this fight being a good one, not just a wash for Law, even though on paper it should be. Law's having these close fights with Emperors while Dofi's locked up reading the morning paper. But I think the combination of Law having heavy psychological baggage going into the fight like he did on Dressrosa, Dofi being intimately familiar with his techniques and being a stylistically bad matchup for him, and that Oda doesn't seem too fussed about power levels, more so telling a good story, I think it would be a close, grueling fight, with Dofi spouting off about how he was born superior to Law, how he's been influencing the world for decades now, influencing the course of history, and Law would just be a speed bump for him, and Law giving a speech about Corazon. I think it ends how the Big Mom fight ended, in some way or another. Law has got to use the silence technique, please. Maybe not the outright win, but to shut Dofi up for good in the middle of his speech. I think that would be really poetic and just perfect. Dofi would either die right there, but since this is One Piece, maybe thrown into Impel Down 2.0 or whatever they make after the war, and he'd go back to reading the newspaper, and this time with everything being over, the paper would be boring, and he would sit there rotting with no entertainment, which might just be the most cruel fate you could ever give Doflamingo. So what do you think? Where do you think Dofi goes from here? Let me know. Also, if you liked this video, leave a like of course, and if you made it all the way here, I must have done something right, so you might want to subscribe to catch at least one more of my videos. So yeah, with that being said, peace out.